get her the things she needed immediately, Daniel could die in minutes. She had more of what she needed in the car, but she had no idea how to get Daniel back to the surface.
Hello and
A
welcome
metallic
to the
crash
second round
sounded
of
at
the
her right
tournament.
elbow.
Let's get down on that
Ziploc
tee and do
bags,
some golf.
she instructed frantically. The bottom compartment, on the left, and tape should be near the top. Kevin laid the things she needed on Daniel's chest, next to her hand. Quickly, on the exhale, she traded her glove for the plastic bag and instructed Kevin to tape it down tightly on 3 sides. She didn't have anything that would work as a valve to vent the excess air, so she had to leave the 4th side open. It should suck against the hole as he inhaled, and then let the air release as he breathed out. Roll him toward me. I need to seal the exit wound. Kevin carefully moved his unconscious brother onto his side. She hoped the position would take some of the pressure off Daniel's undamaged lung. She had to break contact with the wound briefly as Kevin moved him, and then another precious second as she used a scalpel to cut his shirt and jacket out of the way. She taped a second plastic bag against his skin while she analyzed the pool of blood beneath him. Not so much, really. The bullet had miraculously missed his heart entirely, and the major vessels as well. The exit wound looked clean, and she didn't see any bone fragments. If she could just keep him breathing, she could get him through the next hour. Kevin's voice interrupted her frantic planning.
Karsten's still alive. What do you want me to do with him?
Can he be saved? She asked, while she checked Daniel's airway and pressure.
Now that
He'd
was a
lost too
swing.
much blood. He was in shock. She could still make out a pulse at his wrist, but it was weak and fading. She grabbed a syringe from the top tray and injected him with ketamine and a separate painkiller.
Doubt it. Too much damage. He probably only has a few minutes. Oh, hey. Sorry, man.
His voice had changed at the end. He wasn't speaking to her anymore. Is he lucid? She asked. She ran her hands down Daniel's arms and legs, searching for any other wounds.
Jules?
Karsten rasped weakly. Kevin, bring the operating table over here. We've got to get Daniel up to the car. She took a deep breath. Lowell, it's okay. I never poisoned Livy. Of course not. She's only sedated. She'll be with her mother by morning, whether I come home or not. While she reassured Karsten, her eyes never leaving Daniel, she heard Kevin leave and then return. There was a heavy metal groan as he shoved the table through the window and a moist thud when it hit the bodies on the floor. She bit her lip as she continued to work on Daniel, pulling the rubber pieces of his disguise out of his mouth
Okay,
so he couldn't choke
here.
on them,
This is definitely
carefully
makeable.
wiping the contacts from his eyes. How long till Kevin collapsed? He still had a good 50 minutes to enjoy the drugs in his system, but that wouldn't affect how much his body could actually endure. She needed to try to remember that he wasn't the same Kevin, the one who could do anything. She had to go easier on him. But how? Daniel needed speed. If she could just get him to the car.
Proud of you, Jules.
Lowell Karsten wheezed quietly.
You managed to hold on to your soul. Impressive.
The last word trailed off
There's a nice
with
putt
a
for
low, rattling exhalation. She listened for more, but it was silent
And
behind
after
her
the
now.
first hole, we're at even
She'd
par.
outlived Karsten, a feat
And
she
4
never
under
would have put
for the
money on.
tournament.
Instead of feeling the triumph she'd always expected, she was ambivalent. Perhaps the triumph would come later, when the panic gripping her was gone.
Is it safe to lift him?
Kevin asked. Carefully. Try to keep his chest as immobile as possible. I'll get his legs. Together, they hefted Daniel carefully onto the silver tabletop. She took his wrist again, willing his pulse to stay discernible.
Give me 2 seconds, Holly,
Kevin said, as he began stripping the soldier who'd fallen over
Solid
Daniel's
swing.
legs, the one with the least blood on him.
How many more are upstairs?
She glanced at the faces on the floor. She thought she recognized the shorter guard from the metal detector. At
Okay,
least one
looks like
isn't here
about
for sure. He was at the
235
door.
yards
It seemed
to pin.
empty up there, but I didn't see most of these guys beforehand. He was already in the pants, pulling socks over his mangled feet, and then trying the shoes. They were too small. He yanked another pair off the other poisoned soldier. Those looked a little big, but Kevin tied the laces tight. You're going to have to cut those off, she said. He buttoned the white shirt, then threw the dark navy coat over the top, not bothering with the tie.
I'll do what I have to do when we live through this.
Great contact.
Lose the lab coat. It's covered in blood.
Right. she agreed, awkwardly shoving the guns into the elastic band at the back of her leggings. It was barely strong enough to hold them both in place. She shrugged out of the coat and let it drop to the floor.
Okay, let's get this table past all the bodies. Then you should be able to handle it in the hall. I'll sweep ahead and take out anybody who's left.
In seconds, she was rolling Daniel down the hall, half running while Kevin disappeared into the darkness, somehow at a full sprint. Then she was in the metal detector room, and Kevin was waiting, holding the elevator for her. The room was empty. Everyone must have rushed to the observation room when the shooting started. She darted into the elevator. Kevin reached out to hit the button as the doors shut silently behind her. She stared at his right hand on the button,
what you can do with
his
his
dominant
8-footer.
hand, and a sudden burst of understanding had her coughing out one half-delirious laugh. Kevin eyed her sharply.
Keep it together, Ollie.
No, see, it's his heart, Kev. It's on the wrong side. The right side. That's why the shooter missed. She choked out another laugh. He's alive because he's your opposite.
Lock it up,
he ordered. She nodded once, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The elevator stopped, and the door opened to the supply closet. The outer door was closed. Kevin lifted the edge of the table over the lip of the elevator, then went to the door. She expected him to ease it open, but instead he threw it wide with a loud bang.
Okay,
Help!
one
He
under
yelled.
for the round.
We need help down here!
And 5 under
Then
for
he
the
was
tournament.
racing forward silently. She could hear louder
All right, you're gonna
footsteps
put this
coming
in
for them
the,
from the other room.
fairway?
Just one set, she was sure. She pushed Daniel forward as quietly as she could. Kevin was in place before the guard came around the corner. The guard ran right past him, gun in hand, but held low by his side, pointed at the ground. Kevin's gun was high. He shot the guard in the back of the head. The man crumpled to the floor. Kevin stepped forward and put one more bullet into his head to be thorough. The hallway was too narrow to maneuver the gurney around the body. Kevin grabbed it with both hands and lifted it over.
It's quite the smash
Alex
there.
did what she could to help, but she knew Kevin was taking most of the weight. She didn't know how he was still performing at this level, and she was afraid he was going to kill himself trying. There was no other
All right,
guard.
145 yards out.
Get him to the car.
Kevin commanded.
Let me finish up here.
No one tried to stop her. No one shot at her from a darkened window while she ran into the parking lot. The sky was completely black now. The single street light near the front door cast only a dim yellow circle toward the parked cars. She fumbled in Daniel's pockets till she found Karsten's keys. She popped the trunk and ran for her souped-up first aid kit. She knew exactly where the blowout gear was. She'd expected either she or Kevin or both
Solid
would be
swing.
shot, and she'd prepared accordingly. She didn't need the tourniquet or the quick clot gauze, but she had several halo seals, and they would work better than her plastic sandwich bags. She also had a Mylar survival blanket, more saline,
2 under for the
and some
round.
strong intravenous
And 6 under
antibiotics.
for the tournament.
Bullets were dirty things, and infection would be a concern.
Okay,
if
this is the
she could
4th
keep
hole.
Daniel alive that long. She knew she couldn't. Maybe for 24 hours at most, with what she had here. Despair made her hands shake as she ripped open the packages. Then Kevin was right beside her. He threw a heavy black and silver square into the trunk.
Hard drive the cameras recorded to,
Kevin explained.
I'll get him into the back.
She nodded, filling her arms with stopgap measures. When she crawled into the footspace of the back seat, she could see that Kevin had done everything right. Daniel was on his left side. His head was propped up on the driver's headrest, which Kevin had ripped out of place, violently, it appeared. She checked Daniel's airway again, his pulse. She could
Nice.
still just make it out in his carotid. The ketamine would keep him under for a while. He couldn't feel any pain. His system would remain as unstressed as possible under the circumstances. The car started to move. She could feel Kevin was trying to keep the motion smooth for her, but it wouldn't be smooth enough. "Stop," she said. "Give me a minute to get things in place." He hit the brakes.
Hurry, Ollie.
It took only seconds to switch her makeshift seals for the real thing. She got the IV in quickly and then pinned the bag to the top of the seat back. "Okay." As she spoke this time, she could barely recognize her own voice. She knew there wasn't anything more she could do, and the despair was starting to suck her down. "You can drive."
And that'll keep you at
Don't
2
quit on
under
me
for
now,
the round.
Oleander.
Kevin
And
growled.
6 under for the
You're
tournament.
stronger than this. I know you can do this.
Okay.
But there's
Fifth hole
nothing more
coming
I
up.
can do, she choked out. I've done everything. It's not enough.
He's going to make it.
He needs a level 1 trauma center, Kevin. He needs a thoracic surgeon and an operating suite. I can't clean his wounds or put in a chest tube in the backseat of a damn Beamer. Kevin was silent. Tears streamed down Alex's cheeks, but she didn't feel grief yet. Just rage. At the injustice, at the limitations of their situation, at herself for this ultimate failure. If we dropped him off at an
no
ER, she sobbed.
We'd be handing him over to the bad guys. They'll be looking at the hospitals.
He's going to die, she whispered.
Better that than he end up in a room like the one you just busted me out of.
Didn't we just kill the bad guys?
Pace is still in charge, Ollie. Till he slaps the right patch on, and given the current stress level, he might just start smoking again. If he doesn't die, even without his partners, he has no shortage of muscle at his command. The hospital is out.
She bowed her head, defeated. The seconds ticked by. She marked them by the faint, steady pulse in Daniel's neck. She should probably be driving. She didn't know how Kevin was still going, but he didn't
Great
even
contact.
seem fazed by
Nice
his
swing.
ordeal, not slowed in the slightest by his myriad of wounds. He was a machine. At least Daniel shared the same iron constitution. But finding any excuse for hope right now was kind of stupid.
If
Kevin began thoughtfully. Yes?
If I could get you to an operating space, if I could get you the things you needed, could you fill in for the thoracic surgeon?
It's not my specialty, but I could probably handle the basics. She shook her head. Kev, how could we get a suite up and running? If we were in Chicago, sure, I might know a guy, but... Kevin laughed once. More of a bark, really.
Ollie, I've got an idea.
Looks like this is a beauty.
Alex had no sense of what time it was.
Okay,
Maybe
a
3 a.m.,
23-footer from here.
maybe 4. She was ragged with exhaustion, but also wired and jittery. The hand that held her 7th styrofoam cup of coffee was trembling so badly that the surface of the liquid looked like a miniature storm at sea. Well, that was okay. She didn't need steady hands anymore. Joey Giancardi. She never would have thought she could feel so much warmth toward her old mafia handler, but tonight she blessed his name. If she hadn't done what amounted to an intensive trauma course with the mob, she never would have been able to pull Danny through. Each thug and gangster she'd repaired had given her just that much more experience, all of it adding up until she could play both EMT and surgeon tonight. Maybe she should send Joey a thank you card. She ran her quivering free hand through her hair and suddenly found herself wishing she were a smoker.
Okay,
like
so
Pace.
that's going to keep you at
Smokers
2
always
under for
seemed
the
so
round.
serene with a
And
cigarette
6
in
under
hand.
for the tournament.
She needed something to bring her down, to
okay,
slow
nice
her agitated
fresh hole
heart.
here. Let's
But
pop
the
this
only
in the
physical
fairway.
comfort she could find was the cup of strong black sludge she held, and that wasn't exactly helping her relax. Dr. Volkstaff was snoring on a battered couch squeezed between 2 large storage cabinets against the back wall of his workspace. He'd been surprisingly capable, despite his age and specialty. They'd had to cobble together much of what they'd needed in his operating theater, but he was inventive and familiar with his tools,
That
and she was
rather
inspired by
impressive.
desperation. Together, they'd made a potent team. They'd even done a decent job of patching together a makeshift Heimlich valve that appeared to be working perfectly. The gentle beeping of Daniel's heart monitor was the most soothing sound she'd ever heard. Not that it could do anything about the caffeinated overstimulation of her nervous system. Unthinkingly, she took another gulp of coffee. Daniel's color was good, his breathing even. He did share all of Kevin's physical characteristics, it seemed. He was engineered to survive. Dr. Volkstaff said he'd never seen a smoother procedure, and he'd dealt with plenty of lung injuries in his time, though usually puncture wounds. It was possible that Daniel would be walking out of here tomorrow. She carefully set her cup on the counter and then gripped her shaking hands into fists
Nice.
as she walked slowly back to the stool by Daniel's bed and sat. It was actually 2 operating beds bungeed together. Nothing here had been near long
And
enough
you're on
for
the
Daniel.
green with a very
After a second,
long putt.
she
in your
leaned her head
future.
against the thin, plastic-covered cushion and closed her eyes. She thought about what they had accomplished tonight, what she had almost traded Daniel's life for. Devers and Karsten were dead. There might not be another person alive besides Wade Pace who knew she existed, and his hours were numbered, hopefully. Kevin was snoring on the floor, an old dog bed under his head for a pillow. She'd given him the largest dose of painkillers that was safe, and Volkstaff had cleaned his wounds once Daniel was in the clear. Sleep was the best thing for Kevin now. By this time, Val should have dropped Livy at the urgent care center, chosen for its lack of exterior cameras, with Alex's grammatically unsound, tear-stained apology note. She wondered how seriously the police would continue their search for the
3
kidnapper.
under for the round.
Livy was unharmed,
And 7
with
under
no
for the
memory of her
tournament.
time away from Aaron. The DC police would surely have little time to track
Okay,
down a
here we
frenzied
go.
mother who'd thought the little girl looked exactly like an older version of her own child, stolen 2 years ago by an estranged father. There had to be several missing children cases that would match the loose information they'd given. It would keep the authorities focused in the wrong direction. Maybe they'd tie Livy's kidnapping to the death of her grandfather on the same day, but probably they wouldn't. There was an entirely separate cornucopia of motives to sift through for Karsten's violent death. It would look like nothing more than a horrible coincidence. The shadowy powers that be, the people who pulled the puppet strings, would have to cover everything up. One
Beauty.
fact was going to stand out to them. The CIA's second-in-command and the director of a black ops program that wasn't supposed to exist had shot each other,
Okay, a
and a
23-footer
handful
from
of
here.
American soldiers. The puppet masters would probably demolish the entire complex before they'd even had time to make sense of the evidence there. They'd call it a horrible accident, a building collapse due to a structural flaw. What a shame. She thought of the last things Kevin had said to her before he crashed.
You can do this, Ollie. I know you'll save his life, because you have to. And then we'll all be safe. This isn't going to happen to Danny again, so you pull him through it.
She wondered if he really did have that much faith in her, or if he was just trying to keep her from panicking. But would he have allowed himself to pass into unconsciousness if he hadn't believed his own words?
Alex?
Her head whipped up so fast, the wheeled stool beneath her rolled back a few inches. She jumped off it and leaned over Daniel, taking the hand that was weakly groping for hers.
And
I'm
that'll
right
keep
here.
you at 3 under for the round.
She glanced at his IV.
And 7 under for
The
the
ketamine
tournament.
must be out of his system now, but he had an intravenous
it's time to
painkiller
send this ball
that would
on its
keep him
way.
from feeling too much discomfort.
Where are we?
Safe, for the moment. His eyes slowly opened. It took them a moment to find her, and then another to focus. She'd known with decent certainty for at least 2 or 3 hours now that he was going to open his eyes again. But the familiar gray-green nearly knocked the wind out of her anyway. She felt tears overflow her own eyes.
Are you hurt?
He asked. She sniffed. Not a scratch on me. He smiled slightly.
Kevin?
He asked. He's fine. That's him snoring, you hear, not a buzzsaw. The corners of his mouth turned down as his eyes
stuff.
slipped closed again.
Okay, we're looking at around
Don't worry about
170
him.
yards here.
He'll be fine.
He looked really bad.
He's tougher than any person should be. Kind of like you.
Sorry.
He sighed.
I got shot.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Karsten took the gun from the guy next to me when Devers pulled a gun on him.
Daniel explained, his lids pulling back just a few millimeters.
He moved fast for an older guy. They were shouting at each other, but all the soldiers lined up with Devers.
Alex nodded. They were his people.
Devers gave the order, and one of them shot Karsten, and then me. Karsten fell to his knees, but
Nice swing.
started shooting. I didn't have a gun, so I grabbed the ankles of the people near me with your ring.
You did good.
I wanted to get to a gun, but the 2 guys I hit fell on me. I couldn't lift them. My arms weren't working right.
The one on your chest probably saved your life, actually. He kept the wound covered till I could get there. Daniel blinked his eyes open again.
I thought I was dead.
Alex had to swallow. Honestly, so did I for a while.
I wanted to stay until you got there. I wanted to tell you some things. It felt horrible when I knew I couldn't.
She stroked the
That's gonna
side
have
of
to
his
hit
face.
something.
It's okay. You did
Yeah,
it.
you ended up nice and
You stayed.
safe. Still a little work to do,
The
though.
comfort thing was coming to her more easily these days. She'd changed a lot since meeting Daniel.
I just wanted you to know that I don't regret any of it. I'm grateful for every second I've had with you, even the bad ones. I wouldn't have missed it, Alex. Not for anything.
She leaned her forehead against his. Neither would I. They didn't move for a long moment. She listened to the sound of his breathing, the sound of his evenly beeping monitors, and Kevin's robust snores in the background.
I love you,
He murmured. She laughed once, a quick, jittery sound that matched the tremors in her hands. Yeah, I sort of figured that one out, I think. Took me long enough, didn't it? Anyway, though, I love you too.
Finally
Sitting
speaking
at
the same
2
language.
under for the round.
She laughed again.
And 6 under for the tournament.
You're shaking.
He said. I've had
All
so
right,
much caffeine.
let's let her
I
rip.
need a detox. It was still middle of the night, quiet outside, so the sound of a car pulling up to the back of the building was hard to miss. Alex was surprised by how little her nerves reacted. There wasn't much left in her, she could tell. She just felt weary as she straightened up and freed her hands. She pulled her PPK from the small of her back. I really hope that's Val, she muttered.
Alex,
Daniel whispered. Don't
Now that
move
was a
even
swing.
a fraction of an inch, Daniel Beach, she whispered back. I spent too long patching you up for you to go and tear something now. I'm just being cautious. I'll be back in a sec. She hurried to the rear door and peeked past the side of the little curtain. It was the car she was expecting, the ugly green Jag, Val in the driver's seat. She could see Einstein standing up on the passenger side. Alex knew she should feel more, knowing that all of it was over, that almost every loose end was wrapped up. She should be elated, relieved, grateful, possibly shedding tears of joy. But her body was completely done. Once the coffee wore off, she'd be comatose. It's Val, like I thought, she told Daniel quietly as she set the gun on the end of his improvised bed.
you look like you're going to pass out.
Soon, she agreed. Not quite yet. Alex? Val called quietly as she came through the door. Yes. Einstein bounded into the room, head whipping back and forth as he searched for Kevin. He paused and made a little whimper when he found him on the floor. Einstein's head cocked to the side, and then he licked Kevin's face twice. Kevin's snore stuttered. Alex expected Einstein would curl up with his best friend, but his tail wagging vigorously, he turned and ran to her. He jumped both paws onto her hips so he could lick her face. She had to hold on to Daniel's bed to keep from being knocked over. Careful,
Okay,
Einstein.
here we go. This one
He
should save
coughed a
par.
quiet bark, almost like an answer. Then he dropped back to all fours and trotted over to Kevin, nestled into his side, and licked his neck again and again. Alex was shocked when Kevin spoke. The drug she'd given him should have kept him out for, well, she wasn't actually sure how long it had been. Her brain was too exhausted even for simple addition.
Hey, buddy. Hey there,
He said, sounding just like he usually did, too loud. His voice seemed impossibly vigorous for the way his body must be feeling.
Solid par.
Did you
Well
miss
done.
me? Good boy. You told them what happened. I knew you would do it.
Very solid round
Kev?
after 9. Looking
Danny asked.
fantastic.
Alex put her
And
hand
6
firmly
under
on
for
his
the
forehead
tournament.
when he twitched like he wanted to sit
Coming
up.
off a par on the
Danny?
last one. Let's see
Kevin
what
nearly
happens
shouted.
here.
Volkstaff snorted and rolled onto his side. Kevin pulled himself up, wincing. You probably shouldn't move, Alex began, and then when he completely ignored her, Hey, at least keep off your feet.
I'm fine.
Kevin grunted. You're an idiot, Val said harshly. Just stay put for 2 seconds. Val was out of the strange avant-garde runway sari thing and in sweats and a t-shirt now. She strode out through a door marked lobby. Kevin waited, puzzled, kneeling on the linoleum with one hand braced against the wall. She was back almost immediately,
Solid
pushing
swing.
a wheeled office chair, her expression set in angry lines. If Alex had any energy left, she would have sighed with envy. Val looked absolutely ridiculous for someone in a ponytail
So,
and
we
no
have about
makeup who'd gotten
165
no more
yards to go
sleep than the
still.
rest of them. I'm fairly sure they don't keep wheelchairs here, but this ought to work for now, Val said. Sit. Though her voice sounded deeply annoyed, she offered both hands to pull him up. He hissed and staggered when the soles of his feet touched the ground, but as soon as he was seated, he was trying to use them to roll himself closer to Daniel. Ugh, stop it, Val complained. She guided the chair across the room while Kevin held his feet gingerly a few inches off the floor. Val stopped when Kevin was right beside Alex. Alex shuffled over a step to make room. Kevin stared at Daniel's open eyes and good
For
color
the
with
bird.
shock. Carefully, he patted Daniel's hair, obviously afraid to touch any other part of him.
Looks like your poison woman got it done,
Kevin said in a gruff voice.
I'm not sure about the balding Swede thing you got going on, though. Val's idea.
Kevin nodded absently for a moment.
You shouldn't have come in after me. I didn't want you to do that. You would have done it for me. That's different.
He shook his head when Daniel started to protest.
But you're going to be okay?
Kevin looked up at Alex for the answer. She exhaled through her nose and nodded. He looks like he's going to be totally fine. I don't know what it is with you two. Are you sure your mom didn't have a one-night stand with a genetically engineered superhuman?
And that'll keep you at 2 under
when
for the
Kevin's
round.
hand darted toward
And
her,
6 under
Alex's
for the
first
tournament.
instinct was that she'd crossed the line with the mother
All
comment.
right, let's haul off.
But before she
and
could
just
brace for a blow,
smash this
he
next
grabbed her
drive.
roughly and yanked her into an awkward bear hug. She found herself half on his lap, her arms pinned under his, and there was nothing she could do when he decided to kiss her full on the lips with a wet, resounding smack.
Hey, Daniel protested. Get your face off my poison woman.
Alex wrenched her head to the side, finally feeling something again. Nausea. Ah! Get off me, you psychopath! She heard Val laughing. Kevin managed to spin the chair in a complete revolution.
You're a genius, Ollie. I can't believe you did it.
Go make out with Volkstaff. He did half the work. He wouldn't free her. It was like he didn't even notice that she was trying, violently, to wriggle away.
What a performance. I can't believe you just walked
you're
in there and
about
busted me
140
out.
yards out here.
Never tell me you aren't Black Ops. Honey, you're what Black Ops dreams about being.
Einstein whined, and Alex felt his jaws close lightly around her wrist. He yanked, trying to help her escape. Kevin didn't seem to notice. She knew where Kevin's worst injuries were. She'd use that knowledge soon if she had to. Let me go!
Kevin,
Daniel said, his voice measured but icy.
if you don't set Alex down right now, I'm going to shoot you with her gun.
Finally, Kevin dropped his arms. She ducked free, and they both spun anxiously to Daniel.
All right, you're on the
Don't
green.
move,
Okay, let's
they
see
said
what
in
you can do
unison.
with his 8-footer.
Alex breathed again when she could see that Daniel hadn't actually tried to reach the gun.
Volkstaff?
Daniel asked.
I know that name. Where are we? You remember Dr. Volkstaff,
Kevin said.
He saved my best friend's life in 5th grade. After he got caught in the bear trap, you can't have forgotten that.
Daniel blinked.
Tommy Velasquez got caught in a bear trap?
He asked, bewildered. Kevin smiled.
Tommy wasn't my best friend.
He stroked Einstein's head, and the dog rubbed
Sweet.
his face against Kevin's leg, still delirious with joy.
3 under for
Wait.
the round.
Volkstaff?
And 7
Daniel
under
repeated,
for the tournament.
finally putting it together.
You took me to the vet?
Put this drive in the fairway.
Alex laid a hand on his forehead. Shh. It was the right place to go. Volkstaff is a rock star. He saved your life.
Now.
Volkstaff's gravelly voice broke in.
I was merely the assistant, Dr. Alex. Don't be trying to give me the credit for saving Danny.
Volkstaff was sitting up on the couch, patting the unruly tufts of white hair that were arrayed in a jagged halo around his head. It made her think of Barnaby, and she realized why she'd felt so comfortable working with the friendly old man, who was apparently still quite devoted to the Beach family.
It was an honor to work beside you, Doctor,
Volkstaff continued, as he tottered over to them. He appeared frail with age now, but he'd shown no feebleness during the long night. He smiled down at Daniel.
Good to see you awake, son.
He dropped his voice into a stage whisper.
You found a winner, kid. Don't mess things up with this one. Oh, I know it, sir.
Alex frowned. She hadn't said anything about her feelings for Daniel, and Daniel had been unconscious. How were they always so obvious? Volkstaff turned.
What a gorgeous shepherd. This can't be Einstein, can it? It's been years.
His grandson, actually, Kevin told him.
Isn't that something?
He reached down to caress Einstein's ear.
Such a beauty.
Einstein licked his hand.
Solid swing.
The dog was full of goodwill for all mankind tonight.
Now, Kevin,
Volkstaff said, straightening.
would you like to walk again? Because if so, you need to get those feet elevated, and all of you needs to
33
rest.
feet to the hole here.
Don't you dare give me that look, young man. You can use my couch over there. Miss...
Volkstaff's eyes bugged a little as he took in Val for the first time. Alex had warned Volkstaff that the fourth member of their party would show up later, but he clearly hadn't expected someone like this. You can call me Valentine, Val purred.
Yes. Thank you. Well, Miss Valentine, could you push Kevin over to the sofa and help him onto it? Exactly. Thank you.
Alex watched, feeling numb again, her head disconnected from every part of her body, while Val half-shoved Kevin from the chair to the couch. Her expression was irritated, her hands rough, but Alex saw her duck in suddenly to kiss his forehead.
And you, Doctor.
Okay, so
Alex
that'll
turned
keep you
slowly
at
to look
3
at
under for the
Volkstaff.
round.
There are
And
more
7
couches in the
under
waiting
for
room.
the tournament.
Go use one of them. That's an order.
Okay, here we go.
She hesitated, swaying in place, staring at Daniel. Yeesh, you two, Val said, as she stalked back across the room. Sleep before you collapse, Alex. I've had a few hours. I'll keep an eye on him. If anything at all changes on his monitors, the slightest variation, I'll drag you back in here by your much-improved hair, Val promised. Alex bent down and kissed Daniel softly. Volkstaff and I went through a lot of trouble to put you back together again, she murmured against his lips. Don't screw up our work. His lips brushed hers as he spoke. Wouldn't dream of it. Be a good girl and get some sleep like my old family vet ordered you
Nice.
to.
I'll have you know, I'm in the prime of my life.
Volkstaff objected. Come on, Val said, suddenly right in Alex's ear. Let's go while you can still walk. I'm sure I could carry you, but I don't want to. Alex let Val guide her through the door and down the unlit hallway. She concentrated on moving her feet and nothing else. Her surroundings were just a dark blur. Val had to lower her to the couch, but Alex was sure she would have been just as happy on the floor. Unconsciousness took her while she was still falling.
Okay, for the birdie.
Chapter 32. It was a strange morning. For Alex, it was also a very late morning. It was peaceful in the empty veterinary hospital, and no one disturbed her. She learned later that Volkstaff had called his office team, canceled all the appointments, and put a sign in the window that read, "Closed for family emergency." It was an odd place to feel so safe, an unfamiliar place, a place where she'd prepared no traps or defenses. But things had changed. She'd only really thought of rescuing Kevin, but their actions last night had also shifted their position significantly. Kevin was as energetic as ever, despite the fact that he was stuck in the rolling office chair again, his gauze-wrapped feet elevated on the wheeled stool. Val disappeared as soon
And
as she
that'll
saw
keep you at
Alex
3
to
under
take
for the
her
round.
turn on the couch.
And 7
Daniel had
under
had his eyes
for the
closed to
tournament.
ignore his brother, but quickly woke
Okay,
up
it's
when
time
he
to
heard
send
Alex's
this ball
voice.
on its way.
Volkstaff was apparently out to get lunch. The others had left her a bagel and cream cheese. As soon as Alex had finished her examination of Daniel, who was recovering more quickly than anyone who hadn't worked with Kevin Beach would believe, Alex grabbed her breakfast and the newspaper Volkstaff had brought in with the bagels. She read furiously while she chewed. They'd made the front page, though only the people in the room knew that. This all feels anticlimactic, Ollie, Kevin complained, using a broom to push his chair in circles around the room.
This one's a beauty.
Would have been more fun to shoot him.
The big headline for the day was Wade Pace's fatal aneurysm. The journalists had barely
approach on
paused
the
for a moment
green.
of silence
Well done.
before they
All
were
right,
on to guessing
13-footer here.
what President Howland's strategy would be for finding his running mate. There was nothing about a violent shootout in an underground bunker on the outskirts of town. No word about a missing CIA deputy director. No mention of Karsten. Not even the relatively public kidnapping of his granddaughter. Maybe in tomorrow's news. Kevin didn't think so.
It'll be a gas line explosion or something like that. That real story is all going to get buried so deep, they'll name Jackie Kennedy as the Dallas shooter before any of it gets out.
He was probably right. They couldn't be 100% sure, of course,
Yes.
and they would continue to behave with caution, but the pressure was significantly decreased.
Sitting at
Alex
4
knew she would
under
feel
for
the
round,
lightness like a layer of
and 8 under for
helium
the
under her
tournament.
skin, if she could ever convince herself to believe
Nice
in their
bird
good
on
luck.
that last hole. Let's see another one.
After lunch, Volkstaff removed the stitches from Alex's ear and complimented Daniel's even hand when she gave him the credit. Alex was bemused by how much the white-haired old man took in stride. None of them had tried to explain their unusual injuries or even make up a cover story. But Volkstaff asked no questions and showed no obvious curiosity. He didn't comment on the fact that Kevin was supposed to have died in prison, though apparently, Daniel informed her in a whisper, Volkstaff had been at the funeral. He asked only about old acquaintances from their childhood
Oops.
and, more particularly, the animals they'd known together. Though Alex had just barely learned to recognize love at all, she thought she might be falling for Volkstaff just a little, too. Still, they couldn't live in the animal hospital forever. Volkstaff had other patients. After a few minutes of discussing options, Val surprised Alex by volunteering to house them again, back in her palatial penthouse, now that it was safe. For a fee, naturally. Kevin seemed the most shocked at her offer. "Don't let it go to your head," she told him. "I want the dog, and I actually like Alex and Danny, almost as much as I can't stand you." Then she'd kissed him, long enough that it got uncomfortable for everyone. Volkstaff politely turned his back, but Alex just stared. She would never understand what Val
Back in the
saw
saddle
Kevin.
here. Saddle being fairway. Nice stuff. Okay, about 130 yards out.
Kevin began. Alex turned from her organizing. It wasn't quite packing yet. Kevin was lounging in the doorway of the room Alex and Daniel had always shared in Val's home, his left arm braced against the top of the frame. For 1 second, Alex was irrelevantly jealous of tall people in general. It wasn't an uncommon feeling these days, always surrounded by giants as she was. She put it away. "So what?"
So how did the appointment go today? What did you and Volkstaff conclude?
He didn't have to ask where Daniel was now. Daniel's normal shower serenade volume would have gotten him in trouble if the other tenants were any closer. The Bon
Very
Jovi
nice.
phase hadn't passed yet.
This
He was
for birdie.
particularly fond of Shot Through the Heart at the moment. Alex didn't find it so funny, but she tried not to let it irritate her. "The vet thinks Daniel's good to go. I concur. You beaches are a charmed breed." She shook her head, still a little incredulous at how quickly and thoroughly Daniel had healed. "Also, he wants to look at your feet." Kevin scowled.
My feet are fine.
"Don't shoot the messenger. I mean that, literally." His frown faded into his normal expression, but he continued to stand there in the doorway, staring at her. "So," she echoed.
Perfect.
So, do you have any ideas about where you're heading now?
Alex
Sitting
twitched her
at
shoulders
5 under for the
noncommittally.
round.
Nothing too
and
specific
9
yet.
under for the tournament.
Like a coward, she turned back to her worn duffel and looked
16th
over her
hole
stowed
coming
chemicals
up.
again, checking that they were all appropriately protected from jostling. She might have been going overboard with the organization, she admitted to herself. They probably didn't need to be alphabetized. But she'd had a lot of time on her hands, and other than surfing the web for possible new digs, she was at loose ends. Daniel had objected to being examined more than 4 times a day.
Have you talked to Danny about it?
She nodded with her back still turned to him. "He says wherever I want to go is fine by him."
He's planning to tag along with you, I guess.
Kevin's voice was casual, but Alex knew it must be a strain to keep it that way. "I haven't discussed that part specifically with him, but
Ooh.
yes, it does seem to be the assumption." He didn't say anything for a moment, and she really had nothing left to do with the bag. She turned slowly to face him.
Yeah,
He said.
I could tell it was going to go that way.
His expression was indifferent. Only his eyes revealed the depths of his hurt. She didn't want to tell the full story, but she felt guilty holding it back. If it makes you feel any better, he seems to be assuming you'll be there too. Kevin's eyebrows eased back from their normal compressed position.
Really?
Yes. I don't think he's envisioned any more splitting up at this point. Kevin inclined his chin.
I can understand that. Kid's been through a
Sweet.
lot.
All
He's
right,
bouncing
this next
back
one
pretty
for
well.
Birdie.
True. But we wouldn't want to traumatize him again. Don't want him to have a setback.
Alex knew where Kevin was going with this. She suppressed both a sigh and a smile, keeping her face neutral. True, she said in her serious doctor tone. It might be best to keep his environment as stable as possible, aside from all the unavoidable changes. Kevin didn't suppress his sigh. He blew out a huge breath and crossed his arms over his chest.
It'll probably be an enormous pain, but I guess I can stick close until he's adapted.
Alex couldn't resist pushing back just a tiny bit. I'm sure he wouldn't want you to put yourself out. He'll survive.
No, I owe the kid. I'll do what I have
6 under
to.
for the round.
He'll appreciate
And 10
that.
under for the tournament.
Kevin met her gaze for one long second, his expression candid,
17th hole
and then
coming up.
suddenly sheepish. The moment passed, and he grinned.
What's the general area you're looking at?
He asked. I was thinking maybe the Southwest or the Rocky Mountains. Medium-sized city, settle in the suburbs, the usual. No one was looking for them, as far as they knew, but Alex was always a fan of playing it safe, just in case. She'd have to use a fake name regardless. Juliana Fortis was legally dead.
Looks like you're gonna
Daniel's
hit some
singing
sand
cut
here.
off, then picked up again,
I'll
muffled
tell you
by
what,
a
everybody
towel.
ends up here sometimes.
I know a town that might work.
Take this as
Alex
a
shook her
learning
head
opportunity.
slowly. He'd probably already rented a house and set up the new identities. She'd choose her own name no matter what he'd done. Of course you do.
How do you feel about Colorado?
Epilogue. Adam Kopecki sat today's files on his desk and reached for the phone with a smile already in place. He had the best job in the world. Working as an assistant producer for a famous chef's reality roadshow could have meant many things, but for Adam, it meant flexible hours, a
underwhelming,
quiet
but
little
you're out of that
office,
sand,
and
so
a
that's
near
good.
constant stream of positivity. He was in charge of managing the visits to the various mom-and-pop eateries his chef would be featuring on the show, and while he was sometimes jealous of Bess and Neil, who were always on the road trying out every hole in the wall they could find, he believed what he was doing suited his temperament better. Plus, Bess and Neil had to eat a lot of garbage to find the diamonds in the rough, and Neil had gained at least 25 pounds in this past year with the show. Adam had cobbled together a standing desk so that his more stationary job would not start to affect him the same way. And then, out of necessity, no one knew who Bess and Neil were, so no one was particularly excited to hear from them. Thursday afternoon was Adam's favorite.
5 under for
Today,
the round.
he would call the
and
chosen
9
ones.
under for the tournament.
The show was heading to the Denver region in a month, and the
All right,
lucky
next
winners
stop,
were a
let's
barbecue
hope for
place
some
in
fairway.
Lakewood, a bakery right in downtown, and then the Outlier, a bar and grill that was closer to Boulder than Denver. Adam had been skeptical, but Bess insisted that the Hideaway would be the highlight of the episode. If possible, they should be there on a Friday night. The place was a local karaoke hotspot. Adam hated karaoke, but Bess was insistent. It's not what you're thinking, Adam, she'd promised. This place is so cool. Chef will need a parka. Doesn't look like much from the outside, but the style is there. Je ne sais quoi
Nice.
and all that. Plus, the owners are seriously camera ready. The cook's name is Nathaniel Weeks. So fine, let me tell you. I hate to admit to being unprofessional, but I did make a play.
And you were
I got
about
0 response.
150
The waitress tipped me
yards
off that he
from
was
the pin,
married.
I'd say.
The good ones are always taken, right? But he's got a hot brother, apparently. Plays bouncer for the bar at night. I may tag along with Chef for this one. She'd taken a bunch of pictures on her iPhone. As she'd mentioned, the outside was forgettable. It could have been any place in the West. Saloonish, dark wood, rustic. Most of the other photos were of plates of food that seemed to have too much style for such an unremarkable location. A few of the pictures must have been of the cook she liked so much. Tall, full beard, thick curly hair. Adam
Nice.
didn't think he was especially attractive, but what did he know? Lumberjacks could be Bess's thing. A small woman with short dark hair was in a lot of the backgrounds, never facing the camera. Maybe this was the chef's wife. He had the names of all the owners off the alcohol license. Nathaniel Weeks was the chef, so Kenneth must be the bouncer brother, and Ellis, the wife. Adam had remained hesitant, but the hideaway had gotten Neil's enthusiastic thumbs up as well. Best food he'd had in the past 3 seasons. There were always a couple of backups. A coffee shop in Parker and a breakfast-only diner in Littleton were on this list, but Adam very rarely had to contact the backups. The show had a track record of
Good job out
boosting
there.
business by a
5
healthy
under at the end of
percentage
your
for the 2
round.
months after an episode
Well, thank you
aired.
very much for